Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
As America commemorates 22 years since the September 11th attacks, the nation is remembering painful moments that are still fresh for so many. Thank you for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Our coverage starts locally in Del Cerro. The community once again woke up to find anti-Semitic flyers, and this time promoting misinformation about 9/11. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman says a proposed city law aims to hold those delivering them more accountable.
Anti-Semitic flyers were put out overnight in this Del Cerro community. KPBS isn't showing the messages on them. This area and nearby communities have seen a rise in recent months of people dropping off anti-Semitic flyers.
We're disgusted. It's really gross. And on top of that, everything that they're saying is lies.
Councilmember Raul Campillo represents this area. He held a news conference with Jewish faith leaders last week addressing this very issue. He says the cowardly actions only have him doubling down on a proposal to up penalties for actions like this. Right now, people can be cited with an infraction for littering, but Campillo is proposing a new misdemeanor for hate littering.
We have a plan to step up the penalty for this and hold people accountable. But obviously that isn't going to stop every bad person from doing every bad thing that they can. But this is what we can do in our power. We already know that a lot of this hate speech does influence people to then carry out violence in the name of those hateful ideologies. So by preventing that, we're going to be promoting public safety, but also just sending the Jewish community and every other community that is the target of hate speech that the government cares and doesn't want anyone in our community to have to suffer that.
These flyers are meant to push people to bad actions.
Devora Marcus is a rabbi at the nearby Temple Emmanuel San Diego. She's in favor of Campillo's proposal that could see penalties of up to a year in jail and even restitution.
I'm very much looking forward to the passing of these laws and for holding people accountable for all words and deeds that lead to incitement of violence and aggressive actions towards any of our fellow human beings and San Diegans.
Campillo says he will bring a draft of the hate littering ordinance to the council's Public Safety Committee sometime this month. And for now, Marcus says she's focusing on Rosh Hashanah.
My biggest concern is how much time this takes away from the things that we would rather be doing, like enjoying happy times with our neighbors and preparing for our beautiful High Holy Day season that begins this weekend.
A San Diego police spokesperson says they responded to the Del Cerro neighborhood and are actively investigating what happened. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Solemn ceremonies are taking place across the country to remember those who lost their lives and first responders who continue to grapple with the aftermath of 9/11. Gloria Pasmino reports.
Today, we pay tribute.
Mournful Americans honor the nearly 3,000 people who perished when 4 hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and a field in Pennsylvania.
2,977 innocent men, women, and children who lost their lives.
As memorial events take place across the nation, a heightened sense of awareness emerges for those who displayed remarkable acts of heroism on that tragic day.
The degrees of cancer are growing, and the cost of treatment is growing.
Those first responders are still struggling with health effects of handling toxic debris and materials at Ground Zero.
People were coming up with some respiratory ailments that were starting to create some disabilities.
At least 341 New York City firefighters, paramedics, and civilian support staff have died as a result of post-9/11 illnesses. Exposure to dust at the World Trade Center linked to heightened risk of cardiovascular and respiratory disease. Thousands of cancer diagnoses have also been linked to the toxic air, during the attacks.
It's the people who aren't dying but are sick, and they're not living, but they're alive. And no one measures that loss.
With each passing year, the list of first responders who succumb to post-9/11 illnesses continues to rise. The names continually added to the World Trade Center Memorial Wall. Gloria Pasmino, KPBS News.
Locally, dozens of first responders stood outside the Coronado Fire Station to commemorate 9/11. Pastor Mickey Stonier, a chaplain with the Coronado Fire Department, was one of the first crisis responders. At the time, he served on a response team for commercial airline crashes. The chaplain says while the country was still trying to wrap their heads around the 9/11 attacks, he was heading for ground zero.
How large the devastation was. You couldn't capture that in the news media because the force of those towers, of the towers coming down, blasted through buildings for blocks. When bodies were discovered, the whole site would stop.
Stonier says it is important to tell the story to generations that didn't experience that day. The Coronado Fire Department says it will do its part and that this 9/11 ceremony will continue for years to come. Miramar Cemetery broke ground on a memorial honoring families who lost a loved one while serving our country. The Gold Star Families Memorial Monument will be the first of its kind here in San Diego. The Woody Williams Foundation, which helps create Gold Star Family Memorials around the nation, joined the committee to plan and fund the monument. Its dedication is tentatively scheduled for Veterans Day. The family of a Navy corpsman gunned down by a former service member is taking the government to court. They say the killer, who was forced out of the Marine Corps for mental health issues, should never have been able to buy a gun. The case spotlights problems that the military has sometimes had, failing to report disqualified service members to the FBI's gun background check database. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer reports.
Petty Officer 3rd Class Devin Rideout returned to her apartment in suburban Oceanside after her shift at Naval Hospital Camp Pendleton. It was a Friday in 2018, just before 4 p.m., and the 24-year-old Navy corpsman took her new puppy Chip out for a walk. When she returned, her upstairs neighbor, a man she didn't know, was waiting outside her door, and he was holding a revolver.
She really enjoyed being in the Navy. She enjoyed her job immensely. She loved helping people.
Her mother, Leslie Woods, is devastated by the loss of her only child that day. She says they spoke on the phone every day, and Devin planned to become an occupational therapist after the Navy to work with veterans.
I think she had 2 more years left from her reenlistment. And then she was going to transfer to a graduate school.
The man who shot and killed Devin Rideout was a Marine deserter who'd been arrested in 2016. He was diagnosed as schizophrenic, suffering from delusions and hallucinations, found incompetent to face court-martial, and forced out of the service. The schizophrenia diagnosis should have landed the man, Eduardo Areola, on the National Instant Criminal Background Check System used to screen gun purchases. But the Defense Department didn't report him. So when Areola went to an Oceanside gun dealer to purchase a 5-shot revolver, nothing came back.
In this case, it came into the database, and there was nothing there.
Eugene Iredale represents Leslie Woods in 2 lawsuits, one against the federal government and another against the state of California. He says the law is clear. Areola should not have been able to buy a gun.
No additional law was needed to prevent the death in this case. All you needed was compliance with the law that has been in effect for over 30 years, the Brady Act. And that's why we have such a powerful case.
For years, the Pentagon Inspector General has faulted the military for violating the law and failing to add disqualifying personnel to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System, commonly called NICS. The most well-known case was that of former Air Force Airman Devin Kelly, whose 2012 domestic assault conviction should have landed him in the FBI's system. The Air Force failed to report him, and in 2017, Kelly killed 26 people in the First Baptist Church of Sutherland Springs, Texas. Lindsay Nichols is the policy director of the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence.
So the Military has a long track record of not reporting this information when it should. I'm going back to the 1990s when the background check system was first established.
In 2020, the Inspector General found that after the Sutherland Springs shooting, the system improved. Previously, the services reported disqualifying criminal information to an internal Pentagon manpower component, but the information didn't always get to the FBI. Now, the service branches submit it to the FBI directly. But that 2020 Inspector General's report looked only at whether service members' criminal convictions made it into the background check system. It didn't investigate whether mental health diagnoses made it into the system like they should.
The military exists to protect and defend our country from acts of violence. So the requirement that DoD properly report to the background check system for gun purchases directly fulfills the very purpose of the military.
Rideout's killer was sentenced to life in prison last year. In July, a federal judge denied a government motion to dismiss her family's lawsuit. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Nawaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, rescue crews scramble to reach Morocco's remote areas flattened by the deadly earthquake. That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
The city of Oceanside is reviewing its relationship with the Brother Benos Foundation. The organization hired security to reduce the number of homeless individuals loitering nearby. But it's an expense the nonprofit says they cannot afford. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne says a decision on Brother Benos' future is being made today.
Tension between the Brother Benos Foundation in Oceanside and a number of their neighbors has been growing. The organization provides food and resources to the community in the business park on Production Avenue. But business owners in the area say the people Brother Benos serves are causing damage. And property managers say they're having a hard time leasing vacant properties. As a result, Brother Benos has hired a third-party security company.
Can you leave the property?
An expense Ben Meyer, the essential services manager, says is not within their budget.
It's not sustainable for us currently to do that. It is a move simply because of the stakes that have been sort of laid out by the business park and these people they want to shut down.
Brother Benos is part of a committee formed by the businesses, city, and law enforcement officials tasked to come up with potential solutions. But Meyer says there has been little collaboration from the businesses.
It's not an attempt at working with us or working together to address homelessness. They want us shut down. They want us out of here. They want to cut the water off. And for us, we need to do everything we can to keep the doors open. We have hundreds and hundreds of people that depend on us.
Brother Benos owns the building they operate out of, and the city granted them a conditional use permit to provide services, as long as their operations aren't detrimental to the public or nearby properties. Nearby property managers believe Brother Benos is in violation of that permit and are asking the city to revoke it. Managers declined an interview, but provided a list of 14 businesses moving out of the business park due to Brother Benos. But Meyer thinks security has helped improve the situation around the business park, and his clients have been understanding.
And a lot of them have been receptive to that and trying to find somewhere else to go. But again, that's the problem. Where do they go?
Oceanside's first homeless shelter recently opened and is on referral basis by Oceanside Police. As of Monday, 20 beds were available. Oceanside's Planning Commission is taking up Brother Benos' permits and conditions Monday evening.
We'd really like some collaboration, from the city financially on that.
Meyer says the organization doesn't get any financial support from government agencies.
We got to work together to solve this problem. It's not going to be just Brother Benos solving it. So we're hopeful, but,
They have also hired cleaning services and reduced their hours to help address the business park's complaints. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Children experiencing a mental health crisis have increased more than 20-fold over the past decade. And today, Congressman Scott Peters and Human Services Deputy Secretary Andrea Palm held a roundtable discussion with some students about the challenges that they face. KPBS North County reporter Alexander Wynn was there.
This conversation just really speaks to how much more complicated your lives are than for the previous generation.
Health and Human Services Deputy Secretary Andrea Palm started the discussion at Bernardo Heights Middle School by recognizing that students today face more challenges than the previous generation, from bullying to suicide to school shootings.
Am I going to protect myself? Like, what if I'm with my family? What if I'm with my friends? Like, that kind of thinking was because of like the active shooter drills that I've been doing since I was in kindergarten at my school.
I think we're all a lot of us are numb to it, especially.
I remember when our school had a shooting threat and we had to go into a lockdown. It was a big deal and a lot of kids were scared.
And that takes a toll on their mental health.
I think kids are really feeling the weight of the world more than they did in the past.
Dr. Ben Maxwell is a child psychiatrist at Rady Children's Hospital. He says students are more digitally connected, and that's not necessarily a good thing.
The more we can find ways to help kids manage those stressors and manage the information that's coming in through their phones or through their screens or through computers, just this connected world we live in, I think the better we can support them.
And that's where the Suicide Training and Awareness Nationally Delivered for Universal Prevention Act, or Stand Up Act, introduced by Congressman Scott Peters, comes in. Congressman Scott Peters was inspired by what the students here told him in 2019 about mental health and gun violence in schools, and that became the basis for the Stand Up Act, which became law last year. The law prioritizes funding for awareness and prevention of school gun violence and suicide. Peters says middle school students are the target audience for these policies, and it's important to hear what they have to say.
They came up with some pretty good ideas, among them media literacy, so we understand social media better, support for parents, not just for students, or not just for teachers and administrators, and also continued funding for mental health programs in schools. That's the kind of feedback we need.
Sam Boyce was there in 2019 for the Roundtable with Peters. He says it was incredible to see legislation put in place for what they raised concerns about.
Especially with the suicide rates going up and just the overall stigma around mental health in middle school and high school. I've seen it firsthand. I've had my own mental health struggles, and I feel that it's just such an important thing that people need to talk about.
According to Rady Children's Hospital, pediatric psychiatric crisis has increased nearly 28 times from 10 years ago, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
As recovery efforts continue tonight in Maui, the fire-ravaged community is getting help from some San Diego elementary school students and their families. KPBS education reporter MG Perez tells us about the exceptional donation drive started in a second-grade classroom.
Give yourself a big pat on the back. Rock and roll strong.
Shelley Cricket shares her passion for the ukulele with her second-grade class here at Wegeforth Elementary School in Cerro Mesa. Hawaii's most well-known instrument also provides these students with a reminder of what is happening there now, cleanup and recovery from the devastating wildfires last month. Miss Cricket is so passionate about educating her students, she's almost lost her voice.
I wanted my second graders to learn compassion, empathy, and feel like what it would be if you went to school the next day and your school was burned down. There you go, $2, $3.
Just over a week ago, math lessons in this class took on a much deeper meaning as students and their families started collecting spare change to help Hawaiian children in Maui.
$1 gone here.
Miss Cricket has longtime ties in Hawaii, owns property on the Big Island, and spends a lot of her vacations there.
I like the spirit of aloha, and I like to live aloha, and that's just being kind to everyone.
Already more than $700 in coins and other money have been donated, and these students are calculating and accounting for every penny. The rest of the school has joined in, and now the effort includes collecting new school supplies for the next several months. All of it will be sent to the children who need it most.
It's just being a good person for helping some people in need.
It's because they've lost a lot of things and they might have become homeless. I don't know. They need money to buy stuff. So that's why we raised a lot of money.
Even though the palm trees of San Diego are 2,500 miles away from Maui, the connection is strong, and Wegeforth Elementary is creating community there too.
It really was on fire, and there was no escaping it, and people were coming up here covered in smoke, and it was horrific.
John and Johanna Stockham are trusted friends of Miss Cricket. Their home survived 6 miles north of the fire zone, and they've been working for weeks to help students of the Catholic Sacred Hearts School in Lahaina find places to keep learning, like a covered parking lot and unused church spaces. They will make sure every dime and school supply coming from Wegeforth Elementary gets to the children who need it now. Public schools hope to open in these temporary locations by Halloween.
If we can connect them, really connect the kids one-on-one and allow them to write back and forth and learn from one another, I think we're taking the education way outside the classroom.
Kids helping kids with the Aloha spirit.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
MG Perez, KPBS News.
Over the course of the next couple of days, we'll talk more and more about the marine layer. That's going to have an impact on the cloudiness as well as temperatures throughout the next couple of days. Trending cooler, but will that continue as we head our way down the road late this week into this upcoming weekend? We'll let you know coming up. For tonight, though, partly cloudy. Will drop down to right around 70 degrees. Again, cloudiness more so toward the coast, but even some of the interior valleys looking at some of the cloudiness to start things off early on Tuesday. Temperatures climbing back into the mid to upper 70s around Chula Vista and Oceanside. Mount Laguna looking at a mostly sunny sky at 66. Borrego Springs tops out near 90. As we work our way throughout this evening and into your early Tuesday, we'll start to see moisture slide its way off toward the east. Yeah, a little bit of that mid-level tropical moisture sliding its way out of the picture, but you see the clouds lingering, and we'll see those make a return again as we go into Tuesday night and also into Wednesday morning. Let's take a trip down the road here. Here's a look at the coast and notice how these temperatures trend down a bit. As we go into Tuesday, we go into Wednesday, we'll be falling back into the mid-70s. Clouds to start, some afternoon sunshine, temperatures dropping down into the 60s at night. Over some of the interior valleys, also a tendency here to see those numbers dropping in the coming days. Mid-80s Tuesday, around 80 Wednesday, and then we'll stay put in the 70s late week in toward the upcoming weekend under a mostly sunny sky Friday. Partial sunshine, though, as we head our way into Saturday. Mountains also looking at some cooler air filtering in, a little breezy heading into your Tuesday afternoon. Look at this, mainly in the 50s, more like fall here heading into Thursday afternoon and hanging out in the low 60s right into the start of the weekend. Mid to upper 90s, though, across the board as we look toward the desert. Lots of sunshine anticipated. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic.
For our ongoing series on public art, we'll now meet a prolific San Diego artist. She has works at the airport, at the North Park Target, and the Jacobs Center, just to name a few. KPBS Arts producer Julia Dixon-Evans has the story.
Kari Fukuyama's work is the kind of art that reminds you that light exists. She's informed by the influential California light and space movement artists of the 1960s, like San Diego's own Robert Irwin. She works with mostly clear plastics, acrylics, and films that refract and transform light. Fukuyama's first work of public art is outside the mini Target store in North Park. There, she used translucent, colored polycarbonate discs that protrude from the wall in a massive wave. The pieces cast colorful shadows, perched high above pedestrians' heads as they walk by.
Honestly, I feel very fortunate that my first public art client was the private corporation. There's a lot more flexibility with the private corporation when it comes to especially budget.
In her sunny Rolando studio, Fukuyama cuts and arranges tiny slivers of dichroic film, jutting hundreds of pieces out from the wall in patterns that twist and loop.
So make an incision and then just stick this in here.
Colored shadows scatter in countless directions. She was inspired by the movements of a group of starlings known as a murmuration. Each bird communicates only with its 7 closest neighbors, but somehow thousands of birds move flawlessly in intricate patterns.
We feel very overwhelmed, but just kind of focusing on your neighbors, your friends, and your family, and starting small, and that would create this ripple effect.
This new work is a revision of an installation currently on view in a glass case at the San Diego International Airport. The glass affects how light hits the pieces of film. Daniel Dennert is curator of the temporary exhibits at the airport and says because of this, the piece is best viewed in the early morning or at night, much like starlings.
People have different reasons that they're here, but they are all in a place of transformation.
At the airport, Fukuyama's work is placed before Security Checkpoint 6, the main security line in Terminal 2. To see a similar work without a glass barrier, it's on view at City College Art Gallery through September 30th. Fukuyama says she loves designing large works of art to fit each site. She sees public art as a form of arts education for passersby.
Well, the public art, to me, is the most democratic type of art.
Julia Dixon-Evans, KPBS News.
And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. NPR's Morning Edition is covering what the U.S. Justice Department calls the biggest monopoly lawsuit in 25 years. It's all about how Google handles its search engine business. And KPBS Midday Edition is focusing on the state of democracy in America and the importance of media literacy in a crowded news landscape. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Good night.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating and air, restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.